In 1992, a Hollywood director set out to make a movie that he genuinely believed would save lives. He wanted to create a cautionary tale so brutal and so unflinching that it would deglamorize gang culture forever and stop young men from throwing their futures away. Instead, he got the people who helped him make it killed. Within weeks of the film's premiere, the bodies started dropping across Los Angeles. Up to 10 people who worked on the film were allegedly murdered in cold blood, and the director himself was forced to pay extortion just to stay alive. The film was American Me. It was supposed to be this powerful film about how the Mexican Mafia started inside the California prison system. But the director made 3 specific changes to the original script. 3 changes that crossed a line Hollywood didn't even know existed. But to understand why a screenplay triggered a federal RICO indictment, we have to go back 18 years before this film was ever made. Because the original version of this movie was completely different. And if that version had been made, the people who died might still be alive. In 1973, a writer named Floyd Muttrux sat down to write a crime drama. He based his protagonists on a very real and highly revered historical figure named Rodolfo Cadena, known on the streets as Cheyenne. Cadena wasn't just a gang member. He was fiercely proud. He educated himself behind bars. He helped found the Mexican Mafia, La M, because Latino prisoners had no protection. The system was designed to break them. The rule for entry was simple but absolute. Blood in, blood out. You spill blood to join the organization, and your own blood is the only way you can ever leave it. On December 17, 1972, Cadena was killed at the Chino Reception Center. He was trying to make peace between La M and their rivals, Nuestra Familia. He was stabbed over 50 times, beaten with a pipe, and thrown off a 3rd-story tier. He died in the middle of a peace mission, though the politics behind his death were complicated, as some within La M had undermined his efforts. After his death, Cadena became a legend, a martyr. Floyd Muttrux saw Cadena as a warrior. He wrote American Me as a Latino godfather, a story about honor and power and what happens when both go wrong, about men who came together because nobody else was going to protect them. It didn't turn its subject into a villain. It made him human. And Hollywood absolutely loved it. In 1974, Muttrux sold his script to Paramount Pictures for $400,000, one of the largest fees ever paid for a screenplay at the time. Al Pacino was attached to star, and some of the biggest names in Hollywood were fighting to direct it. If that version of the movie had been made, the Mexican Mafia likely would have embraced it. It painted their founder as a legend and respected the story they told about themselves. But that version spent 18 long years trapped in development hell. The script bounced around studio desks while the real gang kept growing across California, until a man named Edward James Olmos finally secured the rights. By the late 1980s, Olmos was a rising star. He'd been in Blade Runner. He'd won an Emmy for Miami Vice. He'd been nominated for an Oscar for Stand and Deliver. He had the clout to make it happen. He got the rights for Muttrux. He set himself up as the star to play Montoya Santana, which was the fictionalized version of Cheyenne Cadena, and he convinced Universal Pictures to let him direct it. It would be his directorial debut. But Olmos hated the romantic hero angle. He didn't want to make a Latino godfather. He wanted to show what he called the cancer of the gangs. In his own words, he said the original 1974 script made Santana a romantic hero, and he was afraid that it was such a cliché. He immediately dismissed that approach. That sounds great in a Hollywood boardroom,
But on the streets of East Los Angeles, it was viewed as an act of war. Because Olmos didn't just change the tone of the movie, he made up scenes that humiliated real people who were still worshipped by armed men in every prison in California.
There were 3 specific changes that the Mexican Mafia took as unforgivable disrespect. The first was the origin story. The film opens with a visceral scene set during the 1943 Zoot Suit riots in Los Angeles. This was a real historical event where white sailors and civilians violently attacked young Mexican-American men in the streets. The setting was historically accurate, but Olmos added something that was completely made up. He depicted the mother of Montoya Santana being brutally raped by a sailor during the riots. The script basically says the founder of the gang was born from that assault. The Mexican Mafia denied this completely. To them, this was a lie that took their leader's dignity away before he was even born. But the second change was the one that truly sealed the fate of the production. He depicted Santana being sexually assaulted at knife point in Juvenile Hall. To understand how serious this was, you have to understand the culture of the organization he was depicting. Everything about this organization is built on one thing: dominance, total, unquestioned masculinity. That is the entire foundation. Showing the man they respected most in their entire history being raped on screen was not just an insult. To them, it was sacrilege, a direct attack on the honor of the entire organization. The gang said flatly that this never happened to Rodolfo Cadena, but millions of moviegoers were about to watch it on the big screen and believe it was real. And Olmos didn't stop there. He added another scene that wasn't in the original. When Santana finally gets out of prison and tries to be intimate with Julie, he can't function like a normal man. He flips her over and assaults her. It made Cadena look permanently broken, damaged beyond repair. And then came the climax of the film. Remember how Cadena actually died? Stabbed over 50 times by a rival gang during a peace mission. But the script for American Me changed history. The movie ends with Santana being betrayed and murdered by his own followers, by his own gang. His own carnales stab him to death and throw him off a balcony. Olmos wanted to hammer the point home that the gang lifestyle destroys everyone inside it. But to the actual members of Liame, this made their brotherhood look like a pack of backstabbers. It erased the way their founder really died and replaced it with his own guys turning on him. Any one of these 3 changes would have been enough to trigger severe retaliation. Put them together, and it was total disrespect. And the man who wrote the original script knew it. Floyd Mutrux never set foot on the movie set. He refused. And after he saw what Olmos had done to his work, he didn't hold back. He said he handed over one of the best things he'd ever written to someone who disrespected it, that Olmos missed the heart, the dignity, the passion. But what turned insult into a literal death sentence wasn't just what was in the script. It was what Olmos said to get it made. Before filming even began, people who actually knew the prison system saw the danger. One of those people was Danny Trejo. Long before he was a massive Hollywood star, Trejo was a recovering addict with deep ties to the California prison world. He understood the politics of the yard better than any studio executive ever could. Trejo was actually offered a role in American Me. He turned it down. Instead, he chose to work on a different movie covering similar territory called Blood In, Blood Out. And the reason why reveals exactly where Olmos went wrong. The producers of Blood In, Blood Out actually went and got permission from the Mexican Mafia's leadership before they started filming. Specifically, from a man named Joe Pegleg Morgan, the godfather of Liame. And when Morgan found out what Olmos was doing with his life story, the reaction was exactly what you'd expect from a man like that. Trejo personally met with Olmos to discuss the American Me project. In his 2021 memoir, Trejo describes how Olmos showed up to the meeting dressed in full cholo wear, a buttoned-up blue shirt, trying desperately to speak like a street OG. Trejo thought the whole thing was ridiculous. He tried to warn the director. He told Olmos the script was taking dangerous liberties with real history, and it was going to get people hurt. But Olmos was locked in on what he wanted to make. He proceeded anyway. And worse, he reportedly began claiming that he had received permission from the gang to make the film. When word of this reached the prisons, it made everything worse. Danny Trejo personally spoke with Joe Morgan. Morgan confirmed to Trejo that he never gave Olmos permission to tell this story. He was furious that his life and Cheyenne Cadena's legacy were being turned into Hollywood fiction without anyone's permission. The movie was moving forward without consent. It was filming inside actual state prisons like Folsom and the Institution for Men. Olmos thought hiring real gang members as consultants and extras would make the film feel authentic, but by bringing cameras into the actual yards, he was putting real people on the gang leadership's radar. And when the film finally premiered on March 13, 1992, the bill came due. The thing about American Me is who actually paid the price for those script changes. They didn't initially target the famous director. They targeted the Bridges, the people from the neighborhood who believed they were helping tell their community's story. Less than 2 weeks after the film hit theaters, the first body dropped. On March 25, 1992, Charles Manriquez was shot to death in the Ramona Gardens housing project. Known as Charlie Brown, he was an actual member of La M, who had been the go-between connecting the production to the street. He was 53 years old. The gang leadership saw him as a traitor. His murder was a message. No one who helped make this movie was safe. But the killing that haunts this story the most came 6 weeks later. Ana Lizarraga was one of the most respected figures in East Los Angeles. Known as the Gang Lady, she was a 49-year-old grandmother, a former gang member who had completely turned her life around. She spent her days counseling kids and fighting to keep them out of gangs. She was the #1 official advisor on American Me. She was so respected in the neighborhood that she actually got 2 rival gangs to agree to a temporary ceasefire, the Big Hazard and the MC Force. She got them to stop shooting each other so they could work together as extras on the film. She actually believed in what this movie was trying to do. On May 13, 1992, Ana was standing in her driveway packing her van. She was preparing to travel to Utah for her own mother's funeral. 2 masked men walked up behind her. They shot her in the back of the head. Jose Gilbert Gonzalez was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The second shooter was never found. But federal indictments would later reveal who actually gave the order. The Mexican Mafia had officially ordered her execution, and according to reports, Gonzalez was officially initiated into La M as a reward for the killing. And the violence didn't stop there. About a year after the release, another unofficial advisor, named Manuel Rocky Luna, was shot multiple times while sitting in his car. Luna was one of the main guys connecting the production to the neighborhood. He helped them get into the real locations they used in the film. His murder came up directly in the trial that convicted 3 gang members tied to the film. According to Danny Trejo, the death toll is actually much higher than the official records show. Trejo has stated he knows of at least 10 people connected to the film who were murdered. Edward James Olmos was placed on the Mexican Mafia's green light list, their official hit list. But the gang's leadership made a cold calculation.
Assassinating a high-profile Hollywood celebrity would trigger massive FBI scrutiny they simply could not afford. So they chose extortion over execution. They realized Olmos was far more valuable alive as a long-term revenue stream.
For years, rumors swirled in Hollywood that Olmos was quietly paying a street tax to stay breathing. Those rumors were proven as fact in 1995. Federal authorities brought a massive 33-count RICO indictment against members of the Mexican Mafia, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The indictment laid out the murders of the American Me consultants in detail. It confirmed in federal court that the killings were ordered as payback for what was in the film. And buried in those court documents was a specific extortion charge. It identified Edward James Olmos as victim number 1. The documents alleged he was forced to pay money and property to the gang for years just to stay alive. The specific extortion charges involving Olmos were dropped before the 1996 trial, but the court documents told the full story of what he'd been living through. At the height of the threats, Olmos applied for a concealed handgun permit. He was forced to hire private security and went to law enforcement begging for help. Meanwhile, Joe Pegleg Morgan filed a $500,000 lawsuit against Olmos and Universal Studios from inside his prison cell. He sued them for using his life story without his consent. Morgan died of cancer on November 8, 1993, before the lawsuit was resolved. His wife tried to keep the lawsuit going, but it was eventually dismissed. Blood In, Blood Out came out a year after American Me. Floyd Mutrux was one of the screenwriters on that film, and the Montana character in Blood In, Blood Out is much closer to Mutrux's original vision of Santana. Noble, a mentor, a man trusted by prison officials to stop violence. Two films about the same world, made a year apart. One sought permission, one didn't. One honored its subjects, the other rewrote their history. Only one of them got people killed. Olmos believed his artistic vision was more important than the reality of the streets he was filming on. He thought he could parachute into a war zone, rewrite the history of incredibly dangerous men to fit his moral message, and then retreat back to the safety of a studio lot. The people who paid the ultimate price weren't the ones making the creative decisions. They were the vulnerable people caught in the middle. Even today, decades after the film's release, individuals with direct knowledge of these events refuse to speak on the record. The fear is still that real, and it all started because a director decided to change a script.